Welcome back. Our next guest is no less than a celebrity among the developer community and even beyond, might I say. He proclaims to be the coolest and the closest Henry Cavill lookalike in the whole of South Bangalore. He is also my colleague and my mentor. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Kailash Nadh, Chief of Technology at Zerodha. He's here to share his experience building two open data dictionaries, Olam and Alar.
So, this is a quick talk that encompasses some history of dictionaries in general, the philosophy of dictionaries, the concepts of open dictionaries, and some effort and experience that has gone into building a few open dictionaries. So, dictionaries are a bit of a hobby of mine. I really like dictionaries. So, this is a short little story. So, what really is a dictionary? It's a commonplace object. Everybody has a dictionary at home, small little pocket dictionary and whatnot. So, in the context of language specifically, it's a word list. It's a lexicon. It's a database of words, and depending on the kind of dictionary, it also has relationships, metadata, and whatnot. A general purpose dictionary will have examples of usage and metadata on grammar, lots of things. If you think of it from a very abstract perspective, it's like an API documentation for human communication. You figure out the client side of it, which is the fundamental rules and framework for grammar and structure, and then you keep filling that in with, you enriching it with words that you derive from a dictionary, and of course, conversations verbally. So it's very interesting to think of a dictionary like an API doc. I like this picture. It's the image of a 4,400-year-old clay tablet. It's a dictionary, and it's very curious that the structure of a dictionary from 4,400 years ago and today, it hasn't really changed much. Vertical lexicon, vertical word lists. And to provide some perspective, add some context, the Oxford Dictionary, which is universally known, understood, used, is just about 140 years old. So a dictionary is not really a new invention. It has existed in many, many different forms over many millennia. So again, coming back to a dictionary, what exactly is it? It is the codex. It's the codification of the sum total of a human language. Well, almost, because dictionaries don't typically have constructs like grammar or structure. They have words, they have definitions, they have examples. And what is language? Language is really the gateway to a civilization. To participate in civilization, you need language. It could be any language. It could be sign language, could be click language, could be spoken language, written, whatever. But without language, some sort of language, abstract or concrete, you can't participate in civilization. And what is language? Really the underpinning of civilization. Civilization cannot exist without language. But I think, although it's everywhere, every household has a dictionary. All of us use a dictionary without even maybe thinking twice about it. You type a word into Google with the suffix meaning, and suddenly you get a meaning. That's the act of looking up, Google's proprietary dictionary. It's widely used. It's used every day. We have pocket dictionaries, online dictionaries, digital dictionaries, dictionaries on the phone, but it is underrated, is what I feel. So why exactly is underrated? If language is the underpinning of civilization and a dictionary is the tool to unlock language, then it should be freely and openly accessible to everyone. And how many open dictionaries exist? So if you go on Google or DuckDuckGo or wherever, and you search for open data dictionary or open source dictionary or free and open source dictionary of one of its many variants, you will find that you'll probably stumble upon just two things. WordNet, well, it's not exactly FOSS, but it has a very permissive license, Princeton's very valuable WordNet database, and Wiktionary, which has existed for the last decade and a half. And you won't really come across much else. So, and this is the case for English. So if you can't really find any mainstream, widely used, well-maintained, open data dictionaries, apart from WordNet or Wiktionary, what about other languages? What about Indian languages? Forget the Latin languages, forget the well-studied, well-researched, well-understood languages. What about Indic languages? So in 2010, I was trying to find an online English-Malayalam dictionary. I'm a Malayalam speaker, native Malayalam speaker, and that's when I went through this whole journey of realizing that dictionaries are everywhere, but they're really nowhere either. And there are no free and open source, open data, open access dictionaries out there. And the one or two dictionaries that I was able to find in 2010, it was junk, spam, ads, and I was really frustrated. And that's when I realized that open dictionaries just really don't exist. So in 2010, I started working on Olam. It's an English-Malayalam dictionary. It started out as an English-Malayalam dictionary. So you can't create a dictionary on paper or in a database digitally without words or data. So I entered the first 5,000-10,000 words myself. I opened up an authoritative dictionary and copied and remixed. And all the obvious words that I could think of, I kept on adding. So once I had several thousand words, I seeded the dictionary with my shoddy attempt of this poor lexicon. And then I managed to scrape together more word lists. Surprisingly, there was a digital Malayalam activity way back also. And I managed to scrape together some unattributed word lists from Malayalam forums, and I put everything together. And then over the last 12 years, Olam has been open, where people can submit data. It's moderated, it's added. So it's been growing thanks to crowdsourcing. And today, Olam has 60,000 English words and 125,000 Malayalam definitions. But the quality isn't great because it's crowdsourced. But in 2011, because I was so interested in dictionaries at that point, after having built and launched Olam, I stumbled upon this RTF file, rich text format, proprietary Microsoft Word document format, I think, which had thousands of pages of two-column dictionary data typed up. And it was in, again, some ASCII font. Unicode fonts was still a bit of, they weren't as widespread. And then I realized, it was on this Yahoo group, I dug up its history and I realized that that file had been uploaded in the late 90s or early 2000s by a person named KJ Joseph. You can see the word Datuk there. It's an honorific title awarded in Malaysia for outstanding achievements in life, similar to our Padma Awards here. And KJ Joseph, his nickname was also Datuk because, yeah. So turned out, I learned that Datuk in his late 60s had taught himself how to type on an old computer, and this was in the late 90s. Then he figured out how to type Malayalam using a proprietary keyboard layout for an ASCII font. And for reasons that we don't really know, and he passed away in 2019. I only had a brief opportunity to speak to him. For whatever reason, he decided to digitize an entire Malayalam dictionary. And this is the 90s, and this is a person who has no technological background. And there were no online Indic dictionaries back then, really. So it's just a shocking thing, that small splinter in history that really changed the timeline. And if you look at the size of the data set, 83,000 Malayalam entries and 106,000 Malayalam definitions, all neatly typed up from some out-of-copyright dictionary that he'd found somewhere. Unfortunately, I don't really know the source. He never spoke about it in the Yahoo groups threads. So I was super excited. I picked up this RTF file, then painstakingly over the next 2 years worked on it on and off, converting it to Unicode, scripting, fixing, manually editing, and in 2013, it was assimilated into Olam.in, the website, and it was a digital dictionary. And because the file was in public domain, it was licensed under an open data license as well when it was uploaded to Olam. So in 2012, I moved to Bangalore, and by 2014, I'd been looking for a way to figure out a way to make a Kannada dictionary happen. And I'd talk about it on and off randomly to whoever I had the opportunity to speak to about it. And in 2019, I, by complete happenstance, met V. Krishna. He's in his 70s now, he's a Bangalorean, who in fact had been working on an open data dictionary for 40 years as a hobby project. He started it as a hobby because he wanted to improve his own language, the key to civilization. Started scribbling notes, then the notes became bigger notes, then it became even bigger notes, manuscripts. So he kept on improving it. And in the 90s, he bought himself a computer. He got CDAC to come install Kannada software, which didn't work. Then he figured out how to use an ASCII Kannada font, and he started digitizing the entire thing himself, thousands and thousands of pages. Now, this is quite crazy, the similarity in V. Krishna's work and Datuk's work, which happened decades apart on different continents and under different contexts. So I was mind blown and boggled to see the scope of V. Krishna's work, and the quality was magnificent, like proper authoritative scholarly work of a high quality Kannada dictionary. He'd attempted to get it published. He'd gone to many universities. He'd spoken to governments, universities all over Karnataka, but nobody really was interested. And in the end, he'd just given up on publishing. So that's when, by complete happenstance, we met. So I showed him Olam. I explained the philosophy behind an open digital dictionary, and he immediately understood. He has no technological background. He has no connection to FOSS, but he immediately agreed to open source his data. So we started working on Alar. Alar means bloom in Kannada in 2019. And because this was a side hobby project, took a while. And in 2020, we launched Alar. It's available on alar.in. And I think it's probably one of the largest open data dictionaries in the world, and probably the only kind when it comes to the quality of work. And the entire story, the history, is chronicled, on this blog post. So the first step is really to get data. The first step to build a dictionary is to have data. Either you write it yourself, if you have a scholarly inclination, you spend decades building a high-quality data source, or you pick up an out-of-copyright dictionary, which is safe to digitize and republish. So once you have data, it has to go in a database somewhere. And once it goes in a database, then you have to build all the features that a basic dictionary would need. Looking up dictionary lookups, searches, viewing some useful metadata, seeing it show up on a nice little UI, making it fast, all of that. So once you have data loaded in a database, the first step is to do a lookup. So take, for example, the word swim. You can look up your words table in your database by the word swim, but that's not exactly how language works. Each word can have its own many different variants, inflections. Swim, swing, swimmingly, and whatnot. And people don't always just look up swim in a dictionary. They could look up whatever. So what happens then? Then how do you match variations of a word to the root word that you have in your open source database dictionary? So in comes stemming. Stemming is a technique. It's a simple language technique. It's an algorithm where a word, once stems, collapses into its root form. Not really its semantics, but really the spelling. So if you stem swims, you get swimming. Swim. Swimming also collapses to swim. Swimmingly also collapses to swim. There are many popular stemming algorithms for many different languages. Porter stemmer, snowball stemmer, these are really popular English stemming algorithms. Unfortunately, Indic languages do not have a lot of, or if any, stemming algorithms at all. Then once you stem, the next step is to tokenize. Again, someone could look up swimming instead of swim, but they could also enter words on your digital dictionary in many different forms. It could be a sentence, it could have spaces, it could have special characters. You strip all of those things off. You normalize the case, for example, strip off punctuations. Then you split to tokens. Token is just a unit of a string. For us here, a token is a word separated by a space. So apple of the eye as an idiom, as a phrase, you get 4 parts, apple of the eye, an array. Then you remove what are known as stop words in all the prepositions in English are commonly considered stop words in all stemming algorithms. You end up with a proper noun or a noun here or whatever. You get rid of all the stop words. So then once you have the cleaned normalized tokens, you stem them. And we saw stemming earlier. It takes a word and collapses it to a root form. So when you pass apple, the words apple and I to the standard Porter stemming algorithm, this is the result you get, APPEYE. And the output can completely vary depending on the stemming algorithm at play. So the next step is to search. Now you've stored the data somewhere, you figured out tokenization, cleaning of a dictionary lookup query, you figured out you've tokenized it to useful, usable tokens, which can be directly matched to the stems you have in your dictionary. So I've used Postgres database here as an example. Pretty much all databases, MySQL, SQLite, everything has full text features. All databases out there. I've just picked Postgres as an example. It has this data type called TS vector, text search vector, simple string number data type where it has built-in stemming. It has a bunch of languages that it supports. English it supports out of the box. German it supports out of the box. There are a dozen languages. Unfortunately, 0 Asian languages feature in it, I think. So passing the phrase apple of the eye to Postgres's built-in stemming function gives you APPLEYE. You can see that it's slightly different from APPEIE, which was a different stemming algorithm. But it doesn't matter. As long as words always collapse to some standard root form, it's fine. And your database would be structured in this manner. There's a word that you want to, that has to be looked up, but you can't really directly search it because of these reasons. And the tokens, stemmed tokens that you store side by side. You can see that my MY there is emboldened. All this while we were looking at this example where it's apple of the eye. But what we have in our dictionary is apple of my eye. And someone could come search for apple of the eye or apple of my eye. But it doesn't matter. Once you stem, all that remains is useful searchable units, apple and I. Everything else is irrelevant. So irrespective of what someone searches for, the hit lands on this entry. Putting everything together, like I said, all databases have full text search functions built in, and Postgres database has this built-in function that turns a human-generated query in whatever form into a token query, and that syntax there, @ it does a full text search on the tokens that we've stored, which is the field called, column called tokens here. But this could be any database. It could even be a CSV file, but the concepts remain the same. So the English dictionary lookup is really ready. That's it. Building an English dictionary is super simple. Building an Italian dictionary or any of the popular European languages, it's really simple because there's humongous amounts of research that has happened. There are tons of tokenization algorithms, tons of stemming algorithms. Tons of these are just built into all popular databases. So there is very little work. All the work is in finding data to run a dictionary in the first place. But unfortunately, what about Kannada or Malayalam or Hindi or Vietnamese or anything? Languages that are unfortunately under-researched, languages for which there is very little computational understanding, languages for which there are practically no tools, languages that don't come bundled with large databases. So there's a trick. There's this algorithm called Metaphone. It was built for English, which kind of works like stemming, but it doesn't really care about the spelling of a word. It concerns itself with how a word sounds, the phonetic properties of a word. So you can see some examples here. If you pass the words that you see on the left side, English words through Metaphone, you get these hashes. These are like MD5 hashes. These are just hashes. And you can see that minor spelling variations, it's agnostic of minor spelling variations. And elephant spelled differently will still result in the same hash because they sound the same. And it was really built for this. It was built for data normalization, spell checking, etc., to build systems that are resilient to minor spelling variations. But this is a very interesting concept, though, phonetic hashing. So when I was working on the Malayalam-Malayalam dictionary, Datuk's dictionary for Olam in 2012, I figured that there were no stemming algorithms or tokenization algorithms available for Malayalam at all. But this seemed like a great hack to try out. You forget about all properties of Malayalam Unicode strings, language, the tokens, and you just look at how they sound, just the pronunciation. So I borrowed heavily from the philosophy of Metaphone, its peculiarities, some of its quirks, how it works really, and came up with a very creatively named MLPhone, Malayalam phone. And unlike Metaphone, it generates 3 hashes. So I have 3 examples here. Those words muttai and mittai both mean candy in Malayalam. One is like a textbook spelling, the other one is a colloquial spelling. And you wouldn't know which word somebody's about to look up to. They may look up the colloquial spelling or they may look up the textbook spelling. But they kind of sound the same. And there are 3 hashes, MTY, MTY, and the other hash. So the algorithm generates 3 hashes. One is the broadest hash. It loses all the nuances of many of these words. For example, the word swatantrata. It could be swatantrata or swadantrata. There could be minor variations. And the way people spell, especially if they're trying to type this up in English, is it S-W-A-T-H-A, S-W-A-T-A? There are a lot of those nuances, sha, sha, sa. So the broadest hash loses everything, and it collapses sha, sha, sa, everything into just one form, sa. That's why mutai and mitai both collapse to MTY. It's just gotten rid of all the properties, phonetic properties of most of those characters. But the second hash retains some of the phonetic properties, doesn't throw away everything. And the third hash retains all the phonetic properties. So if you really want to find a word by exactly how it sounds, the most specific third hash comes handy. If you want to find words that all sound similar, mutai, mithai, swatantrata, swadantrata, whatever misspelled, then the first hash comes handy. So when I was working on Alar, V. Krishna's dictionary, I figured that MLPhone can be turned into KNPho, again, very creatively named, Kannada phone. It also it does exactly the same thing. And porting it from Malayalam to Kannada was a breeze because most Indian languages, Brahmic languages that use the Brahmic scripts or Devanagari scripts, they all have the same properties, close to 52 letters. So it's possible to extend this to all Indian languages. And the algorithm is actually quite simple. You define a map, English hash map, to the native Unicode characters of a particular language, and you have a bunch of substitution steps. These are all open source algorithms now. So it's possible to have an IndicPhone algorithm that can generate phonetic hashes for all languages. Someone just has to put in a little bit of effort to copy the maps, change the characters, change the rules slightly. I've been meaning to formally write this up and publish it as a paper for the last 10 years. I may try and do it in the next 10 years. It just hasn't happened. So the other really important component of an open dictionary is its property of being open, an open license. ODBL is a very specific, it's a license very specifically built for databases. People also use Creative Commons. Actually, people don't because there are very few other open data dictionaries, but Creative Commons may also be suitable. So it's important to pick an open data license that allow people to use, reuse, remix, publish, republish. So we looked at a bunch of things that went into building a digital dictionary, but this is just the core. You need all of this. You need a nice UI, you need a search box, you need a glossary, you need APIs to build a mobile app and whatnot. So all of this stuff has now been packaged into this project called dictpress, Dictionary Press. Started working on it in 2019. I was only able to release V1 literally last month. So everything that I've spoken about and more, and a lot of community features where people can contribute to a dictionary, there's a moderation UI, all of that stuff is bundled into this project. There's also an open source project. And with something like this, if anyone here is interested in building a dictionary for their native language, you can save a lot of time and effort. You just have to find the data. The tools are here. There's also an open source mobile client which can be connected to this backend, and suddenly you have a mobile app for your open dictionary. Some statistics for Olam.in. There are 2+ million people who use the website, the dictionary website every month, and this is just the website. The mobile app also has similar usage. Now, if you think of it, this is a Malayalam dictionary, and Kerala is one of the smallest states in India. There are Malayalam speakers as a fraction of all language speakers in India is a single-digit percentage. And yet, there is so much demand. So you can imagine how much demand and how much value and how much necessity there is for open, freely available, open access dictionaries for other Indian languages. And it's just sad that it doesn't exist. I'm aware of many universities, many institutions who have digitized lots of dictionaries, who've created high-quality dictionaries, but they hold it hostage. And a lot of this work is taxpayer-funded, and there's no rationale for language or open data, an artifact of civilization to be black-boxed and held up, especially by democratically elected governments and institutions created for catering to society and research and civilization. So it's a shame that these institutions do not open up data, create more open dictionaries. One can hope that they will. And really, this entire exercise, my dictionary projects over the last 12 years, they're all dedicated to Datuk and V. Krishna, people who have nothing to do with FOSS, people who had no context or background of open data, and yet turned out to be some of the biggest contributors to language and open data and open source, really probably in the world. And that's just a mind-blowing fact that keeps blowing my mind every time I think about it. So thank you. If anyone has any questions, I can.
Hi, Kailash. Yeah, so you had mentioned ODBL, right? Like, essentially for your open database licensing. So, like, of course, like for community, you're aware of, in terms of software, we have tons of different license options, like, you have MIT and Apache licenses and all sorts of other stuff. So, are there other options as well, like in terms of data licensing, or like where you can go to read about this, or, if there's anything specific?
There are very few licenses. ODBL was born out of the fact that there are very few open source licenses that specifically target data. So you have Creative Commons, which is widely used, which is all right, but ODBL is specifically tailored for databases. They cite this very good example. It also has this distinction of having a license for the database and its contents. So you could have a database of photographs and the database has one license, but each photograph could have a different copyright which belongs to a different person. So their ODBL's position is that a database and its contents could have separate licenses. So when you look at it like that, I don't think there are any other licenses that are so well thought out for data. So ODBL is maybe kind of de facto, but Creative Commons is most widely used.
Hi Kailash, wonderful talk. And so, I mean, first of all, when I came to this open source conference, we have some, I'd say, biased or cliched ideas of open source, GitHub and code. But I think your talk or your experience gave a more, I think, a broader and a much bigger perspective of open source. Because as you described your experience with V. Krishna, and I mean, these are not techies, but these were the people who actually made your project possible because of the data. So yeah, I mean, thanks for this perspective. But my question is, let's say, I mean, you have created Olam.in and the Kannada dictionary also, but first of all, at this stage, can you say or can you market it as the truest or the most authentic form of Kannada or Malayalam dictionary? And if not, what will it take to brand it as like Oxford is a brand for authentic English? What would be required for your projects to be a brand for authentic Malayalam or authentic Kannada?
For a dictionary to be deemed authentic, firstly, thank you for the kind words. And for a dictionary to be deemed authentic, there's no formal process. It's really a process of acceptance and consensus. When the Oxford Dictionary was being published, right before that, in the 1600s and really in the 1700s, towards the late 1700s, there were some immense dictionaries. But Oxford Dictionary was the one to really apply a scientific, rigorous lexical research approach to a dictionary. And when it came out, it kind of instantly got widespread acclaim and attention. There was no one body that said that, yes, this is going to be the dictionary. It was just that. It was acclaim and acceptance. So I think for a dictionary to be accepted as a high quality scholarly dictionary, it's just about acceptance. So like I said, Olam's English-Malayalam dictionary, it's crowdsourced, heavily crowdsourced. So it has quality problems, which slowly keeps improving. But it is widely used. It's used by millions of people. And I've seen it being cited in high court judgments. And I know of journalists who use it. So is it an authoritative dictionary? That I don't really know. So I don't really have an answer to that. It's really about acceptance. But the Malayalam-Malayalam dictionary, Datuk's work on Olam, that could be classed as an authoritative dictionary because it was a physical authoritative dictionary before he digitized it. It must have been in print 75 years ago, out of copyright. And similarly, what V. Krishna has done, in my personal opinion, it's of very, very high quality and it's immense. Now, if it receives wide acceptance and acclaim, if it starts getting used in the academia, it naturally gets elevated to the position of an authoritative dictionary. But really, there's no formal process. It's just about usage and acceptance.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so I've spent some time working on, data where we have mix of different languages. For example, so I was just thinking, what do you think about scaling this? Like, how would it scale to, or do you think it would scale to, text which contain multiple languages, especially where maybe you have right to left or left to right scripts? Just wanted to quickly get your thoughts on that.
Absolutely, that's just a technicality. So a phonetic stemmer or a tokenizer, you just have a slightly tweaked algorithm that works for RTL. It's not a problem at all. but all the principles remain exactly the same. You need to tokenize, you need to clean, you need to stem, you need to have full text search in this context. And full text search is kind of a universal de facto for text search. So, and full text search is available for RTL already. So there is absolutely no reason why RTL is a roadblock. And yes, it's exactly the same pretty much, just minor differences.
Yeah, that's cool. And also around, like when you have text with mixed languages, for example, maybe you have both mix of English and some other language like Arabic. Do you see like an approach like this can easily scale there when trying to understand that mixed content?
You mean from a technical perspective, is it possible to mix multiple languages into one framework, like a framework that we discussed? Is that the question?
Yeah, correct. So make multiple languages.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So dictpress, the tool, in fact, it can host n number of languages in a single database. Uh, a dictionary, a digital dictionary is really entries and one-to-many or many-to-many relationships, some metadata defining them. So the objects that are related, they could be whatever. They can belong to whatever language. They're described by the metadata. A piece of metadata will say that this is an Arabic word, this is an English word. So technically, it makes no difference. So that tool specifically has been designed to host many different languages in a single dictionary.
Well, thank you, Dr. So, hi Kailash. So, I'm a huge fan of Olam, by the way. I've used it a lot. I've recommended it to a lot of family members as well. So, you mentioned about how Olam uses MLPhone encodes phonetics, right? And I think Olam is the perfect use case or case study for this because Malayalam has many different accents and there's different slangs for the same word. So, how exactly do you internally represent the same word in different regional slangs?
You refer to an authoritative dictionary and decide what to use. So that's not really a technical problem. It's whoever curates the dictionary, they have to have a certain view. And there is no one dictionary that is really the truest form, codification of language. And dictionaries are also political tools. You can publish, a certain publisher can publish a certain dictionary in a certain way, include, exclude certain words to make a political statement. So there's no formula there. It's a biased process, dictionary creation and curation. So what we've been doing for Olam is sticking to the most authoritative form. And I use authoritative in quotes here because you refer to a published dictionary and probably pick the most widely used form. So it's more art than science. Sorry, we are out of time for questions, but if you have questions, please come by off the stage. Thank you.